everyone to today's weekly web chat. We're back from Thanksgiving break, and I'm really thankful that I get to share these two ladies with you today. I'm joined by two Dynamite teachers, Johanna and Yulia, and we're going to talk to you today about Breakout Edu. But let's get started by just meeting these ladies. Johanna, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where are you? What do you teach?
Yeah, hi, I am Johanna Ibarra. I teach 6th grade social studies at Liberty Middle School in West Fargo. This is my 6th year in West Fargo, and I have always taught 6th grade when I've taught, so it's what I'm used to and what I'm most passionate about.
Fantastic. And Yulia, where are you?
I am at Central Valley High School in Buxton, North Dakota, and I've been teaching here since 2012. I teach high school English and German, and before teaching at Central Valley, we taught abroad in Germany for a few years.
Awesome. So today we're going to check in about some Breakout EDU, and I've gotten to talk to each of you a little bit about this topic. But I want to hear how each of you got started in Breakout. Like, what was the appeal of doing a Breakout EDU for you? But first, Johanna, will you just explain what Breakout EDU is?
Yeah, so Breakout EDU is an interactive way for kids to learn and engage with content. So students are presented with some kind of challenge or puzzle, to some scenario that they need to get into the box to solve this problem or to show what they know, or a little bit of both. And then the idea is that students are able to work together to solve the different challenges, open up different kinds of locks based on the clues and the things that they find. And then the goal would be to open up the box by the time limit, which is generally around 45 to 50 minutes, but it can be variable.
Would it be fair, either of you, last year I did one of those escape rooms with some of my nieces and nephews. Would that be a fair comparison of like having to solve some of the problems in an escape room, but you're having to use classroom content in order to do it?
Yes, I think so. I think that makes sense for a comparison. In an escape room, you're trying to break out, and in a breakout, you're trying to break in.
And how did you get started? What motivated you? Why did you want to do a breakout in your classroom?
Well, a few years ago, must have been 3 years ago maybe, Janet O'Hara from the RRBEC came to talk to us, and she actually presented Breakout EDU. Mm-hmm. And as a staff, we got to do a breakout session. And that's how we were first introduced to Breakout EDU. And we really enjoyed it. And some of us started using some breakouts in class. Some of us started to create their own, or some had students creating theirs. And at one point, we just thought it would be really fun to do a school-themed, school-wide breakout. And that has gotten a tradition, and we've done a few now, and it's just kind of stuck with us. Students really like it, they enjoy it, and we just continue to use the resources. Our school decided to purchase a few boxes, and we just keep thinking about those boxes that we have standing around in the lounge, and we keep grabbing them ever so often.
And figuring out how to use them. And you mentioned these boxes, and you've both mentioned some locks. For people who aren't familiar with Breakout, you can do breakouts in a few different ways, and we're going to get to look at some pictures of some different options. So you can have a physical box that kids have to unlock different padlocks and different codes in order to get into. I like that comparison, Yulia, of in an escape room, you're trying to break out. But in these situations, the kids are trying to break in to the box. What was appealing about this to you, Johanna? Like, why Breakout?
I think it's just a different way of doing things. I am lucky to have an instructional coach that really supports teachers, which is what their job is. But to help me get it set up, and so it wasn't as much of a daunting task. But as far as I got started, if I remember correctly, I think I was actually at the PBS professional development that was at MSUM. And so someone had done a session on it there. And then from there, I kind of did my own research and found one that was already created. So all I had to do was go on to the portal, print off some things, make some copies, different things like that. And then was able to get some help with my instructional coach as well. And then we're lucky to have a couple of boxes available that a teacher had let me borrow.
Nice.
And so it just kind of went off from there.
I'm hearing two things from both of you. One, that it was helpful to have some person, whether it was Janet coming in from a regional education office or your instructional coach, it was helpful in doing your first breakout and having someone available who had already done one and who had some of those tricks available. And I'm also hearing just that for the first one, being able to work or use something that someone else has already created was also a nice entry step. So how do I find those things? Like, where would I need to go? Do you have any recommendations? Where did you go to get started?
There is the official Breakout Edu page, and they have a playground, I think it's called, where it's just a shared Google Drive where any users can upload their own games that they created. Or they also have, you're pulling up right here, and there are a lot of games to choose from. The only disadvantage is that you will need a membership to go there. You can also go to teachers, pay teachers. There are a lot of Breakout EDU resources as well.
Okay, so there are some things that I can do just for free without having any membership fee on Breakout EDU.
Yeah, those are actually the only ones I've ever used. I don't have a paid subscription.
And you have found them helpful and that they're pretty well done?
Ever used. I've also I haven't done it with students yet, but I know there are digital breakouts as well, where it's all online, you don't need any materials. So one day I was looking for one on ancient India, so I just Googled ancient India digital breakout, and there it was. So you don't necessarily have to have a paid membership to do any of it, or even a box.
And you wouldn't have to have the box. And since you brought up the digital breakout, I'll share this. In the resource packet, after I have some breakouts with forms and sites. So if you are a Google school using forms and sites, otherwise, if you are an Office 365 school using forms and whatever teacher page, there's this very nice digital breakout template that's here for you. And this was one that I found online. I've also shared a sample. This is one that a friend of mine and I made for a group of teachers. So we made a pretty simple Google site, and then within it, it has several embedded, there's just an embedded Google form, and the kids have to put in the codes. The kids, in this case, were teachers, would have to put in the codes for the Google form. So this is what Johanna is talking about, of just, you can do a breakout where they have to solve these puzzles and do these things, and you don't need a whole bunch of keys and boxes and things like that. Have you done a digital breakout, Yulia?
Yes, I have. I've done a digital and a hands-on, and I've done a mixture of both. I honestly prefer the hands-on one, just because I feel like it's sometimes fun for kids to have objects in their hands, to actually go through something. The digital ones are easier to create, though, I think.
Okay, so that's a nice option. And from what I've seen in watching, I participated in a breakout where we did have to do different and like solve the codes. I've done 2 of those with other teachers, and I've led this digital breakout, and I had more fun with the hands-on breakout. Of the digital breakout was great. It's still like, it's kind of a fancier version of a web quest. I guess when I was in school, we still learned as a teacher, like creating web quests for your kids. This was, I think, more fun than a web quest, but I had more fun with the hands-on. Johanna, would you talk about just like why you have, and I have this nice little infographic up, but for you, why have you chosen to, and it sounds like you've done a few now, but why do you like breakouts in the classroom? What did they add?
I guess I feel like the graphic really sums it up, but I would say that kids are super engaged the entire time. They're watching the timer. They're excited about it. They want to work with each other. I found it best when the groups are, I have around 24 to 28 students. So I found that 4 boxes works best. And these that are larger than, I don't know, maybe others have experienced different things too, but I think.
So 4 to 6 kids per team.
Yeah, yep, something like that. 6 to 8 maybe, depending on what you have. Would be ideal, but obviously that isn't always true for all kids, all people, and it isn't always possible to have 4 boxes either. The first time I did it, I think I only had 2, and the feedback they gave me was that they wanted smaller groups. But as far as the why would be, they're really engaged, they're excited about it. It can either be an introduction to what you're trying to do, it can be maybe reteaching, it could be review. It kind of depends on what it is that your goal is and what's available to what you find, or if you're interested in creating your own. So I think it's really versatile as far as how you can use it.
Those are some great reminders of the different ways, like when to use it, of this is a great way to reteach, to review content. It's a great way to really reinforce problem-solving skills, team-working skills. You can start to introduce some new concepts. How has this worked as a school, Yulia? You have this as a school-wide challenge. What does that look like?
Well, it has worked very well. You have to consider, too, that our school is not too big. We have 1 class per grade. And when we've done these, we've done them just on the high school or middle school side combined. So we've only done them 7 through 12. So we're working with like 75 students, somewhere around there. So it's not the numbers you might encounter in Fargo. But it has worked really well. It's been a really interesting experience. It does a few different things with, well, it engages the students. And I think we keep doing it because it builds those connections in between classes and with students. It enhances their soft skills that are so important these days. And you can make them correlate to standards, which we have done in some breakout games. And other breakout games have been more broad critical thinking skills in general. And in the end, if you do it more in a classroom setting, as Johanna said too, it can really evaluate the learning outcome of have they understood what I wanted them to learn or not. So in the school setting, it's a little bit different. I think you focus more on those soft skills and building relationships. And in the classroom, it's probably more around the learning and the critical thinking piece.
That's a great distinction of just how you might use those for different focuses for what you're looking at. In the resource packet, I have a couple of simple videos from Breakout EDU and just some tips, as well as if you're wanting to kind of see what this looks like in a class, these are a couple examples of students actually doing a breakout and kind of what that looks like. Can you describe what it looks like in your classroom, Johanna? Like, what are the steps involved? What would this look like if I came into your class and your students were doing a breakout that day?
You see them working in teams, ideally 4 boxes, but it wouldn't have to be. And then you'd probably have them in somewhat separate parts of the room, but depending on what the challenge is looking for, asking you, you would probably see things posted around the classroom. Maybe there'd be an envelope on each of the tables next to the boxes. You'd see a box with a bunch of locks on it of different varieties, directional lock, letter locks, different amounts of number locks. And then the goal would be that students would be engaging in conversations and problem solving together to figure out what the answer is or what the combination is for a particular lock to open.
So if I'm someone who really likes clear structure and things to be neat and tidy, it sounds like doing a breakout might give me anxiety.
I think you can structure it how you want, and also your students as well.
Okay.
I would say it's definitely going to be louder than maybe what you're used to, and you're not going to have students sitting in rows doing worksheets and reading. But I think that once someone would try it and see the engagement, they might change their mind. But of course, that's depending on the person as well.
Oh, that was so interesting that you brought that up. A lot of times when I even think about myself as a teacher, I see my own teacher evolution of when you are in college and when you finish college, what you think the perfect teacher is going to be in the perfect classroom. And then as you keep going, you realize, oh, I actually like when they interact and when they're louder and they're thinking and talking. And I think that perception of education has just changed so much, and it constantly changes, which makes sense because society is always changing. And right now, I think we're in that time where, it appears that learning theories are more about the student-centered classroom, where the teacher is more of the guide and facilitator. And I feel like that has become more important because it appears that's more what speaks to the students of the 21st century, maybe. And in those classrooms, really, I feel like the teaching goal should be really to facilitate cooperation and problem solving among the learners. And I feel like the nature of Breakout Edu really fits perfectly into that because it's very dynamic and active and creative. But I do think that if you are that person that needs everything to be quiet and very neat, the breakout might make you go a little crazy right away because it is letting go of control. And anybody that has done a breakout before, if it's a good breakout, Johanna would probably agree, I mean, you really get into this and you see the time ticking and there are, screams, we can't do this, and kids get nervous. It's an intense scenario. So if you don't like that, I would push you to do it, but I think it would be an experience that everybody has to deal with too. It's really great and fun to watch the kids go through it, but it's not the need sit in roles that, raise your hand kind of atmosphere.
Well, and both of you have said this a couple times, that it's about the kids' engagement. And if the kids are excited about what they're doing, it's going to get loud. But what a great reason for it to get loud. And I like what you just said of like, even if it's something that would make you uncomfortable as a teacher, think about how it would work for the kids. Like, they are the learners in this environment. And so if this would be a good challenge for them, then it's worth it. It's going to be loud. It's going to be a little intense, but that's worth it because the kids are excited about what they're doing. And isn't that the point? Like, isn't that kind of the dream situation in classrooms? I wanted to check in here. So Johanna was kind enough to share this lesson of, you have this whole lesson so that students create breakouts for each other.
Right. Yep. So I had done quite a few breakouts last year, and students really enjoyed them. So for the end of the year, I just created a couple of days for the end of the year where students would create their own breakout scenario for other people to solve. So this is how I did it. There's certainly other ways to do that.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the links that you see are directly from the Breakout Edu site. I didn't have to create any of it. You also notice that depending on the supplies you have available would obviously vary on what locks you would open.
Sure. Like this option here about the circle and locks, that's going to change depending on your resources.
Right. Yep. And so I wrote it for students to use. I don't really have a key per se, but I would write down like what the, we as a class created the scenario together. We based it on a civilization we had previously studied this year because that's what we talk about in my social studies class. And then we chose a story as to why we needed to break the box open or why we needed to open the box. And then from there, we were able to, each small group created a clue so they wouldn't be able to rely on each other. They would have to be individual clues because sometimes clues will lead to other clues, but if you're in a different group, that wouldn't necessarily work unless you work together. Maybe if I were to do this again and again, we could look at clues that relate to each other, but for this, we kept it simple that way. And then they tried to solve another class's, or they tried to solve each other's clues in that same class. And then at the very end, one of the last days of school, they were given one other class to try to solve.
Oh, so that's really cool. And I hadn't understood quite like the whole structure of this. We hadn't dug into it. So I really like that. So within a class period, that class was creating one breakout together.
Correct.
Smaller teams were responsible for different sets of, for a individual clue.
Correct. Yep, a individual clue or clues to go to one lock. And they would have to come up with if they're going to post anything or if they're going to print copies off or whatever the case may be. And then I was able to facilitate, I guess, 4 different breakouts in one day. That was a little intense, if I'm being honest, but it worked. And trying to keep it up in my brain was key, that I wrote everything down. Some of the stuff would get posted ahead of time, but some of the stuff would confuse other groups. And so I didn't have that either. But it worked, even though it was kind of a lot.
But that's really cool that, and I'm sure, like, yeah, you could figure out a system, right? Period 1 does period 6's thing. So at the end of the day, period 6 sets up,
Correct.
Period 1 does it. And then at the end, when they've finished, they have to set up the breakout for the next period, like the breakout that they created, that there would be some ways. But that's a great way of mixing it up. And now you have those breakouts, like that the kids have, and if they were good breakouts,
right,
you can now just use those.
Correct.
That's very cool. How does that compare to your school-wide? And I know you said you've done some in class as well, but how does that compare to the school-wide? Johanna mentioned we create the story. Do you want to tell us about this story, the reward for the return of Claude?
Yes, at Central Valley, our mascot is the Valiant. So when we first thought about doing a school-wide one, we followed similar steps. We introduced a character, Claude the Valiant, and every breakout we've done so far has been around him. One breakout was about us getting attacked by the Black Knight, and Claude had to battle him. Another breakout was about Claude getting lost, traveling the world, and students had to find him and help him back. Another one, actually the very first one, was about actually finding out who this Claude person is.
Oh. And so you and your team, your colleagues, created this little opening video. You were kind enough to share a couple of these sample videos. And so you created this. This was the hook for the kids to tell them like why they are doing this series of tasks, like what their mission is in a way.
Yes, that was their introduction to that particularly themed breakout session.
I can see why kids would get excited about that though. So you have this clear, I mean, it feels very Mission Impossible to me. I loved the idea of potentially being a spy when I was a kid. I think I could see why kids would really get pumped about doing this in class. And having done this, I did that breakout room last year with some nieces and nephews for their birthday present. And so there were 4 of us. There was me, a 6th grader, a 5th grader, and a 3rd grader. And they, at the end of the day, just these 3, because that was their birthday present. They didn't receive a present. We did this breakout. And as we were leaving unprovoked, they all looked at each other and they went, "This was the best present ever." And like, if nothing else, like that for me, like hearing that from, like I said, a 5th grader, a 6th grader, and a 3rd grader, I was like, okay, yeah, this works. This type of thing, if they're working together and solving and kind of getting to be spies, it's just that engagement factor that you said. But when you can layer in actual content or community building skills, and I agree that you're calling them soft skills, Yulia. It just always feels like those soft skills are really important skills of those kids working together, of like Johanna's kids building these things. Like, that's pretty powerful.
And we could certainly have kids create a video to go with it. Mm-hmm. I'm depending on kind of how much time that we had to. But that was cool too. I feel like that would really make kids excited about doing it. So that's really cool, Yulia.
What program did you use to make your videos?
We have a teacher here who does great with videos, and she has been creating all of our videos. She uses iMovie.
Yeah, and that would be relatively easy. I mean, students could even create kind of an introductory movie. You can use PowerPoint or Google Slides to even make a little movie and just put it on so that it's on repeat and so that it animates going through. But there would be lots of pretty simple ways. But you're right, Johanna, it's another level and it's a lot more time. And so you have to kind of like, if you were having students do this, I don't know if the video production payoff is worth the time. So it kind of depends on like what you're, like you both have said, what are your learning objectives? Start with that. What are the skills you want to highlight? And if they've been doing video creation a few times all year, and that's a final skill you want them to practice, why not?
Our biggest reason for creating the videos was that depending on the breakout that we had, sometimes everybody played at once. Other times we had different groups at different times competing against each other. So our video was a way of ensuring that everybody got the same type of instruction. And all of that went pretty quick too, because we didn't have, you know, Johanna talked about it takes time to set up the boxes and to get everything ready. So we didn't really have a lot of time always. So the video was our way of presenting the scenario, giving the task in a quick, you know, manner, and still engaging and really getting the kids excited about what they're doing.
That makes sense. And I like, you're right. If you need it to be consistent, that consistency factor, like if you have these different teams starting in different rooms with different teachers facilitating it, that video becomes much more helpful. This is just a sample, like a sample clue. I'm assuming this is a directional clue.
It's actually both. It's a directional and a letter clue.
What would you have to say? Like if I'm still on the fence, if I'm a teacher and I'm like, I still don't quite get it. I don't really understand the breakout. What would be your words of encouragement, or like, what would be your big why? Why should I at least give this a shot?
Well, I think the goal of education is to really equip and ready students with the tools that they need to succeed in life after school.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like we should try to provide our students with opportunities to take charge of themselves and their surroundings and their learnings. And if we want our students to become active members of our society, we need to allow them to become active participants in their learning. And there are a lot of ways to do this, but breakouts are one great way to really tackle that.
Active participants in their learning. I love that.
We'll echo everything that she had said as well, but I feel like I really haven't seen kids as excited about things as I have with Breakout. There are some other things I've done that I've seen that with, but certainly day in and day out. You can't knock it out of the park every day. Obviously, you do your best to engage students in the way that you best know how, whatever it is that you're doing. But I would say that, especially because the lessons are already done for you and you don't necessarily need to pay for them, then it's worth a shot. There are some that are quite a bit more complicated than others, but I think that the lessons that are created are good, or they wouldn't probably be posted there. So I think probably the only hiccup then would be availability of materials.
Sure.
You need to pay for them, but I think that the digital ones are a great way to start. And maybe if you can convince some people in your school or district that the digital ones are worth it and they're free and that you'd like to amp it up, maybe you'd find success if you've already tried it on your own.
You've mentioned some of the expenses. How much are, like if I went to Breakout EDU and I don't need a membership, so I don't need to pay for that, but when you bought your boxes, and Johanna, you mentioned that your school has bought some. Do you have an idea like about how much is that? And it would be the box and all like the different locks that you would need. How much is a kit like that?
I think if you buy it directly from the website, you like, if I'm wrong, it's like 125-ish.
Okay.
Does that sound right? Otherwise, you can go on Amazon and buy things separately. That ended up being a little bit cheaper. I submitted a Donor's Choose project and was lucky enough to be funded with that. So I had requested materials for 4 boxes, but I didn't get the actual breakout kit. I just got like 4 lock boxes, 4 directional locks, invisible ink pens, like all separately. I don't remember how much it was per box, but I am thinking it was cheaper than the breakout box itself.
That's a good tip from you of just, if you go on Amazon, if you kind of have a sense, look at some pictures, look at some of the different kits. There are different types of locks.
Right.
There's nothing particularly, I mean, if you have a class, if you have a tech ed class in your school, they could probably easily build you a little box. And what did you, each of you put, Johanna, what did you put inside the box? Like when the kids unlocked everything, what's inside the box for them?
I've done it a couple different ways. Sometimes I put pencils inside. Sometimes I put a sticky note with a smiley face on it. Sometimes I've given candy out, generally after, just because it would be mass chaos if they were all jumping in to get it. But I think it depends on what your goal is.
Mm-hmm.
To me, I mean, and for teachers in general, it's not really about what's in the box. It's more the experience to open it. So I guess I haven't put a ton of thought into what's in it.
I love that though.
But
yeah.
I'm sure there's other ways to do it too.
Yulia, what's in your box when the kids go through and they are able to rescue the valiant knight?
It depends on the mission. I think our last breakout was about like a chemical explosion in our chemistry lab, and we needed to find, I don't even remember all the details, but we needed to find like some kind of a liquid that would like that would fix the problem so that like the chemical spill or the explosion would not hurt us. Or I think the video you had attached as well, so you can see that too. So inside of the lockbox were actually jars with that yellow liquid that will save our school.
The inside the box was, what the potion that they needed to solve the problem and to save the entire school. That's very cool. And I think that's a good, if people are hearing of all of these locks and getting into these boxes, it might be easy to feel like, what is the purpose of the box? So the box itself doesn't need to have much of anything in it. And so you could have kind of whatever you wanted with these different locks on it, so that kids have to solve these codes. You've both shared a lot of, I think, I've loved so many things you've said. I loved that it's not about what's in the box. It's about that process of the box. It's about these soft skills that they're learning, but make sure you're thinking about what are the learning goals that you want. I love that idea that this is a way that we can engage students in their own learning and I've said it already, but just that excitement factor and that engagement factor of having kids excited about what they're doing in school. And as a high school teacher, that peak excitement is rare. And I take your point, Johanna, to heart. We can't have that peak excitement every single day. We as teachers would die of exhaustion, and then those things that are special and exciting would no longer be special and exciting. But this is a nice way to spice things up and do something different for you and for the kids. I guess I get kind of bored as a teacher. Have you found this fun as a teacher? Like, is this just exciting for you to add to your practice?
Yes, I think so. And I think even preparing the breakout, whether you make your own or whether you take one off the internet, is still a fair amount of work and thinking. Even if all the clues and all the answers and everything that you need to copy is provided, it still takes a little bit of time to even think through it and riddle it out. So it is a good challenge.
Yeah, I would say when students are working together, it's really cool to watch. You don't necessarily see that on a daily basis or weekly basis or maybe even more. So it's cool to see students take on leadership roles that you maybe haven't seen before, or for students to just be engaged in something that they haven't really been engaged in before. And so it's cool to see students in a different way. And maybe if they're the same then that they are always, but that isn't always the case either. It's also nice to see them not have an answer right away. So you can kind of decide there are hint cards you can have or not, or you can just provide tips along the way. With the actual Breakout EDU kit, there are actual hint cards.
Okay.
But, depending on the challenge and the difficulty of it, sometimes I just will provide assistance as I go without trying to give an answer. So I think you as a teacher can decide how you want to structure that. And so then if you have a limit on the hints, then they're forced into deciding if they really want to ask or if it's not worth it. And they'd rather save it versus in maybe a regular day, they would ask a question without really thinking about it and just get an answer.
That's a great point too, of that, yeah, they have to really be strategic of when they're getting help, and they have to really just power through some of those challenges and some of that cognitive dissonance and that uncomfortable feeling of not knowing. They have to just keep trying and keep trying different things and keep figuring it out.
Yep.
And I guess I think that that's in general true of teaching for us too. We keep trying new things, we keep figuring something else out, and things work, and then we try something else. Yulia, are you doing a school-wide breakout this year yet?
We haven't done one yet. We're thinking about the spring.
Okay. And Johanna, have your kids had to break in to anything yet this year?
Yep, so far we've worked on a couple, and then I'm going to try a digital one next.
Fantastic.
So, yeah.
All right. Well, I can't guarantee that they will be available, but if anyone is tempted, like wants to know more about Breakout EDU, feel free to reach out to me, and then I can see if either of these ladies are available to just give you some tips, some pointers, answer some basic questions. The resource packet does provide some helpful places of just where to start. I think those two resources that Johanna mentioned of just look through the free resources on Breakout EDU and check out some of the Teachers Pay Teachers. And you even mentioned just Googling the topic that you wanted and digital breakout, and that you were able to find some stuff. So things exist out there. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to make this from scratch, but it's a great way to try something new. And what a fun challenge to maybe do a fun, engaging activity before the Christmas break when the kids are a little squirrely anyway. So harness the squirrely into something that is productive and exciting as kind of a nice little holiday, pre-holiday break for those kiddos. Thanks so much, both of you, for taking the time to do this and just sharing your experiences. It's very inspiring.